People's Business is made possible by our partners, Solar Dynamics, the most efficient energy systems.
Good evening and welcome to the People's Business. I'm your host this afternoon, Wendy Burke. Our topic today, online commerce and insight. We'll be looking at the online platforms as well as doing international business in Barbados and what that's all about. To help us discuss this topic are three panelists. Our lone lady on the panel is Ms. Connie Smith, the Managing Director of Tricor Caribbean. Mr. Derrick Cummins, the President of BIBA, the Barbados International Business Association, and he's also the Chief Executive Officer of Amicorp Bank and Trust. And our final panelist, Mr. Kevin Hunte, the Coordinator of Government's Global Business Task Force. I wish to welcome all three of you all this evening to the People's Business. We are standing by to bring you more details as we come to hand after our break. Welcome back to the People's Business. First off, I'll go to Ms. Smith and we'll look at what is Barbados playing with now? What's our playground like in terms of online commerce and international business?
Wendy, let me thank you first of all for having me on the program this afternoon and for also helping us at the Barbados International Business Association and the collaboration with the public sector to shine the spotlight on the importance of international business for Barbados. International business for me is everybody's business because it touches on everything we do and everything we have done. We talk a lot about tourism in Barbados because that's something that's very tangible that many of us can touch and feel. But international business is a similar sister and partner for us all in growing the economy.
Okay. For you, Derrick? I believe you're muted.
Good night, all. Wendy, thank you for the opportunity to share your stage tonight. International business is critical to the development of Barbados, and BIBA has always played a role in its development, pushing for efficient and effective platforms on which to do business, champion the needs of our practitioners, partnering with government in its many arms of innovation, legislation, and dissemination of information. As Connie said, Barbados cannot rely just on tourism and the other industries, but the international business industry is one that has offered great value to the nation and our economy for years past, and it is able to do so going forward. It is imperative that with the potential for growth and development in this industry, that we develop the skills, we develop the platform, we develop the technologies that will see us engage and be competitive on a global platform.
Okay, and Mr. Hunte, you are the head of the task force trying to marshal other companies to see Barbados as the ideal place in which to do business. Tell us a bit more about your role.
Good evening, Wendy. Good evening, Barbados. Well, substantially, I function as the Director of International Business under the Ministry of International Business and Industry. And it is the role of the ministry, as it were, to establish the ceiling and the floor for our international businesses to operate within Barbados, not just from the perspective of Barbados being able to glean corporate tax, but from the perspective also of these companies being able to add value to Barbados, whether it is through the employment of Barbadians, whether it's through purchasing of property, acquiring property via leasing, etc. Specifically, the task force has been developed as a result of the corporate global minimum tax rate that is being proposed through the OECD, and also because government recognizes the need, the proposal notwithstanding, for Barbados to take a critical look at the international business sector, take a look at how we're doing business, take a look at the technologies and the various platforms and investment vehicles that are involved, and seek to redesign Barbados's international business and financial services sector for the next few years to make it viable and to make Barbados the place to live and the place to work.
I'm glad you spoke to the redesigning of the sector. And what I want to find out from Mr. Cummins as the president is, how has the landscape changed in terms of the types of businesses that we've been able to attract from offshore? Before, it was a lot of finance that we were dealing with, but what's the market looking like now? What kind of businesses have they been able to lure to our shores?
You're correct, Wendy. We've done a lot of wealth management in the past, and corporate management, planning for wealthy families, high net worth individuals, also for high net worth and corporations. And that looked at trusts, that looked at investment management, portfolio management. We look now at newer economies, and we think about what makes the world go around today, really. The technologies, the fintech, financial technologies, whereby we see more and more we're moving away from the brick and mortar bank, and pretty much moving away from a lot that is brick and mortar to be able to do anything from any place globally. We've spoken a lot about medical cannabis. You will hear more about that as we have our licensing agency up and going now. We talk a lot about renewable energies. We still talk a whole lot about healthcare and medical tourism. And for sure, we see Ross University as a vanguard in the offering of education from the Barbados perspective. So yes, we diverge and we move with the economies of the world. We move with what is new and what is relevant. International business and global business is not static and cannot be stagnated. So therefore, our regulations, our legislation, our platforms cannot and are not static.
Experience for you been pretty much the same as what Derrick was just speaking to? Connie?
Oh, sorry. I didn't hear the beginning of that question. You were asking whether our experience has been the same.
Yeah.
And that is correct. What Barbados has been able to do is to attract businesses from all over the world, and as well as all types of businesses, as Derrick just described. We continue to be able to be agile enough and to be at the forefront of everybody's top drawer to be able to attract that sort of business. So we talked just now about the renewable energies, and we talked a lot about the medical cannabis opportunities. There are a whole range of other opportunities that Barbados has been able to attract. More recently, you would have seen that the welcome stamp, although introduced by the Ministry of the Ministry of Tourism, has also affected the international business, because it has also made people a lot more aware of the opportunities of doing work from Barbados. Now, while that has not been strictly international business in the sense that they are not licensing entities in Barbados, it has made them aware of the opportunities. And as a result of that, we've had significant other opportunities in the form of, for example, from producers who are interested in Barbados. There are other organizations who are considering Barbados to set up centers of excellence, specifically in the area of technology or accounting and information of that sort. So it has created a greater awareness, and therefore we're able to build on those platforms and therefore create the better synergies that I mentioned earlier with respect to the relationship between tourism and international business. And that augurs well for the development of Barbadians, and that has always been at the forefront of Barbados's development plans. We have always differentiated ourselves as being a jurisdiction of substance, as well as having the double taxation and bilateral investment treaty network that we've developed and had significant pride in developing over the last several decades. And that continues to differentiate Barbados. And having been regarded very, very highly globally as being a jurisdiction of substance means that we've been able to offer developmental opportunities for the people of Barbados and not rely heavily at every turn to have other expertise driven or brought to Barbados.
In terms of us having our pool of individuals here to adequately run these companies, because I realize the entire face of it has changed. Initially, you would have a situation where these companies came and you would have the foreign managers, but a lot of the people now helping to operate these offshore companies are actually locally trained, based, and have been selected in the top tier positions of these companies, which is good. Now, from you, Kevin, in terms of, you spoke to the whole OECD, etc., and there used to be a thinking that once upon a time, companies only came here to try to escape higher levels of taxation, where they were birthed, etc. We now have a situation where we're hearing about the minimum rate tax law, etc. How are these going to impact on the solid environment, more or less, that we've created to be lower companies here? Is it going to perhaps cause companies to shift away from us as an offshore destination?
Thank you for the question, Wendy. You're absolutely correct from the point of view that tax or corporate tax structure was one of our main selling points. In fact, Barbados's tax structure under the old international business company regime saw companies paying or around the region of 0.25% in corporate tax to the Barbados Revenue Authority. We had a change in that corporate tax structure due to other international events around the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, which saw the introduction of a new tax bracket ranging from the higher end of 5.5% on a reducing scale down to a minimum of 1%, depending on the quantum of your earnings. Now, what also happened at that time was that Barbados removed the difference between the international business company, as it was known proper under the international business company legislation, and now all companies are incorporated under the Companies Act of Barbados and therefore deemed to be Barbadian domestic entities, regardless of their ownership. What it means is that all companies in Barbados pay the same or are placed in the same tax bracket according to the amount of revenue that they earn. What the global minimum tax rate is aimed at, first of all, because I think there's some misconception out there that the global minimum tax rate is aimed at every company. That is not so. The global tax rate is aimed at companies that are part of what is called a multinational enterprise, an M&E, and if they are earning 750 million euros annually and over, then they fall within the bracket of being under the Pillar 1, or well, more specifically the Pillar 2 of the OECD initiative, which then carries with it a minimum global tax rate of at least 15%. For Barbados, if Barbados then retains its current corporate tax structure from 5.5 to 1%, and let's make it easy, and a company falls within the 1% bracket, the country of origin, or where that company originates from, has the ability under this new framework to require of that company to pay the difference between the 1% and the 15%, that being 14%, to the country of origin. Now, in our work that we've been doing in the task force so far, because as you can imagine, Wendy, this is a very intricate operation that is happening, and it is one that, while it is receiving lots of political attention, it is one thing to have political attention, it's another thing to have full political buy-in and implementation. And therefore, there are some challenges within the EU bloc. We still have to await what is going to develop in the United States of America. And what is happening is that the entities that we've engaged with so far that will be caught by this particular bracket, they have indicated, well, look, we prefer to wait and see what is happening. I must tell the people of Barbados that they have all expressed tremendous desire to remain in Barbados. They love Barbados. They appreciate what Barbados has to offer. And by that, I'm not speaking of sand and sea and sky, but I'm speaking in terms of our stable society. I'm speaking of the same workforce that you would have referred to earlier, Wendy. I'm speaking of the availability of our information technology, our ICT platforms. I'm speaking of our educational system, our stable system of government. All of these are things that are tremendous drawing cards for persons who are conducting international business in our shores. And indeed, they don't just want to conduct business in Barbados, but many of them prefer to live and work in Barbados. So the companies are pretty much in a wait and see mode to see what will happen. The good thing about it is that it is not only Barbados that will be affected by this particular regime should it be fully implemented, but indeed some 130 other odd countries that will be impacted.
Okay. Derrick, perhaps you can tell us what BIBA is doing in terms of preparing for this minimum tax rate, in terms of your membership.
Well, thank you, Wendy. BIBA works and offers our professionals to work hand in hand with the ministries of international business and other ministries, Ministry of Finance, BRA, etc. You will find that a lot of our practitioners, our tax advisors, and our lawyers are working. Kevin spoke of the changes made at the end of 2018 when we changed as well for about 21 legislative changes. We did change the Companies Act, change our tax regime. BIBA and the BIBA Task Force worked assiduously back then, hand in hand with government, to bring that about. I remember Kevin, I think, joined the Ministry of International Business in August of that year. And it was all hands on deck. And what BIBA is able to do is to bring together the practitioners of our 140 or so members with the government ministries to get around a table to assess all the options, the pros and cons of each. And we are also able to give our platform where the government can then disseminate information back to the practitioners who this will affect. Because you understand when this happens, service providers like myself at Amicorp and Smith at Tricor, we are hearing from our clients what's going on, what's the plan, where is it in Barbados, what is Barbados doing? And the sector has to be able to respond to that. We have to be able to have a firm and a strong message to take back to the clients from all around the world. So we do a lot of work with government, and we've got to say we really welcome and thank the government for being open and for accepting, for the most part, input from the professionals in BIBA, because we have to have the same message. We need to know what the government plans are and speaking from the same hymn book, so to speak. So that is part of what BIBA has always done. We get to, and we want to, I would say, see legislation that impacts the sector before it's proclaimed, before it's passed. And very often we get to give input in that. We get to see drafts and to also give input into those. The next things that happens, again, Connie at Tricor is a global company. Myself at Amicorp, 30 territories, 40 offices, 30,000 professionals. We also get to understand what other jurisdictions are doing about this. What is Singapore doing? What is Malta doing? What is Seychelles doing? What is the Isle of Man and Jersey doing? And we have that knowledge that we can also feed back into the government. So we play that collaborative role with government, because the reality is we can't do it on our own. Government sets the platform, but it's so critically important that government hears from the practitioners who then have to use what we develop. And that is a lot of the role that BIBA plays.
Okay. Well, we are on the People's Business, Online Commerce and Insight. When we return after the break, we can take your calls at 228-5562, 228-5563. You're listening to the People's Business. We'll return in a moment. And we're back on the People's Business, looking at online commerce and insight. 228-5562, 228-5563. Our call numbers if you wish to speak to our panelists, Ms. Connie Smith, Derrick Cummins, and Kevin Hunte. Before we left off, we were talking to Mr. Cummins about the role that BIBA has been playing in trying to help to address the proposed minimum tax rate that is going to be impacting a number of countries around the world. Now, Connie, from your perspective and the company that you run, is the fact that we're signed on, or the current climate in Barbados, do you feel in any way pressured, or as if, okay, I'm going to look to shift to another jurisdiction, or are you happy with the playground Barbados is presenting for your company at present?
Absolutely. I think that the collaborative environment that both Derrick and Kevin would have mentioned before is important. I am Barbadian. The firm that I represent is global, but they have always been interested in Barbados, and the jurisdiction has always been very responsive, and the kind of business that is done in Barbados complements the portfolio that Tricor offers globally. So we have always been keen to continue to see the development of Barbados and add in any way to that. I do not see that the challenges that are being faced globally or in any way going to affect that. What I do see is that over the years, we have realized that people don't only select Barbados for tax. So in many of the other countries around the world, and even in our regional backyard, people have selected jurisdictions because purely of a zero-rated jurisdiction. Barbados has not ever been a zero-rated jurisdiction and has always offered a much richer offering. And I think that my team and my team globally has always appreciated that Barbados is seen to be different and is seen to be a lot more substantial and be able to attract all kinds of different businesses, and it does diversify the offering that we offer regionally as well as internationally. What I see happening more is again the collaboration and understanding more what people's needs are globally, and making sure that Barbados can interpose itself and attract that business over and above everybody else. So again, the collaboration that we enjoy with the public sector is critical, because as Derrick said, when we are appreciably before COVID, but when we were pounding the pavements to understand what people were looking for, where the flows of money are, where those flows going globally, and where can Barbados interpose itself, where can Barbados add value, that's the conversation that we take back to the ministry to say, these are the business opportunities that Barbados needs to get ahead of. This is why we are advocating or lobbying for these changes. And those conversations are important, because the clients then realize that Barbados is responsive, Barbados is resilient, and Barbados offers them all kinds of opportunities, and not just a one vehicle solution that would only be able to fit part of their business solutions.
I'm glad you mentioned the issue of COVID. How has it impacted on your ability to do business here? And this question goes both to you, Connie, as well as to Derrick, as the heads of two offshore businesses.
I have to say that, that quote about never wasting a good crisis is something that we had to take advantage of in this case. So for many, many years, Barbados has talked about becoming digital and having a digital transformation initiative. But I think that when we started to see that COVID was going to be a lot more than we all anticipated, that Barbados had to pivot and implement a lot of the digital transformation that we had been talking about, but not necessarily had not been as far down the discussion as we should have been. So the opportunity to really engage and to really make a difference was critical. And I have to say that the Ministry of International Business, as well as the Corporate Affairs and Intellectual Property Office, those are two key agencies that service providers in Barbados have to interact with on a daily basis. So they may not have been perfect on day one, but working with the MIST, which is the Ministry of Innovation and Science and Technology, I think we were able to add things on a daily basis. And again, the collaboration, the openness to having the discussion to find out where the gaps were, where were the deficiencies, and also finding a solution that may not necessarily have been online at the time, but finding the solution that we were able to meet our clients' needs. And it also provided an opportunity to say that we were open for business beyond 4 or 4:30. Many of us who work in global firms are in the habit of working at 11 or 2 o'clock, depending on where our business is. But it did give us the opportunity of having a solution that we could offer to clients regardless of the time. So I think that the Barbados stepping up to accepting the opportunity of embracing digital transformation was ours to do something with, and I think that we were able to achieve that in a meaningful way.
Okay, and was it the same for you, Derrick?
Yes, thanks, Wendy. I agree with Connie wholeheartedly. Our infrastructure that we have here in Barbados, that we always boast about to our clients, it worked, and the evidence that it could work. When COVID started, I was CEO of another banking trust. And before COVID, we had spent months talking about remote work. But once we started talking about remote work, we realized that we needed a bigger discussion about alternative work arrangements. And then that got into compressed work weeks, extended work days, job sharing, all sorts of things. And the more we went down that rabbit hole, it seemed like with engaging on with our lawyers and our HR professionals on employee rights, it seemed like a never-ending rabbit hole. But then came end of March 2020. We have to go work from home, and everything happened automatically. So all of those challenges that we thought we had to implement remote work for our staff, it became like immediately possible. One thing Connie touched on was the ministries. And Kevin at the Ministry of International Business, one thing in our legislation in doing business as far as substance, board meetings for these companies that are registered in Barbados, this is one example, ought to happen in Barbados with all our many directors coming to Barbados and having these meetings. During the lockdown, the ministries granted waiver for these board meetings to continue with directors being outside of Barbados and there being we not being offside of the regulation. So things like that we were able to do with immediacy, and it really showed that this sector is a robust sector. Again, we are not building widgets in this sector, so the ability to work from home meant that there were minimal to no layoffs due to COVID, and work continued.
Okay, we have a caller on the line. Good evening to you.
Hello, good night, Wendy, Burke, and your other guest. Well, I'm listening to the program, and I found it very interesting. Well, you're actually speaking about something that really touches me in a very special way. When I heard about the love that visitors have for this island, I come in contact with a lot of visitors on a one-to-one basis very often, and it's very evident. It's very evident of the love, the potential they see in this country, and that makes me feel very proud. So here y'all thinking about that love, I just thought that I would just briefly speak to y'all about that love that's very evident to this great nation, Barbados.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
And I guess you, Kevin, over there at the ministry have been ensuring that everything is on the level where encouraging, supporting, and getting businesses to operate here, albeit within our rules and regulations, is on par with what is going on elsewhere globally.
Yes, Wendy, and that role has even increased over the last 2 years, as we have to monitor developments that occur within primarily the OECD, as well as monitor developments happening within the European Union that can have an impact on businesses and the appetite that businesses will have to come to Barbados, because depending on what is happening and depending on how Barbados may or may not be viewed or classified by international agencies and organizations, can have tremendous consequences for businesses in terms of, for example, their ability to conduct banking and have access to banking facilities. And so we need to ensure that Barbados remains at the top of the game, that Barbados remains in good international standing, while yet at the same time preserving areas of our national, international business and financial landscape that we believe that ought to be preserved and not to be eroded. I want to thank the caller for her comment, and I am glad that she was able to make that comment, because very often the general populace seem to think that the whole concept of international business and international financial services doesn't really apply to them, that it applies to the Connies and the Derricks as they operate as CEOs in various companies and entities. But really and truly, international business affects all of us. And regardless of our station in life, regardless of our vocation, we all play a part in making Barbados an attractive place to live and to work. And so thank you, caller, and I want to encourage each and every one of us, wherever we are, whatever service we are engaging, to engage persons and to offer optimum service delivery so that people, both local and international, will speak well of Barbados and will definitely want to do business here.
Is there a rating for us presently in terms of where we're at in the scheme of things? How is Barbados positioned in the world?
Well, we are on different platforms, and so I'll try to answer it as succinctly as I can. Within the OECD, there is an organization called the Global Forum, and that Global Forum is responsible for assessing countries and giving countries ratings based on certain things that primarily fall within the whole realm of the anti-money laundering environment. And in other words, then, how well are we doing in terms of beneficial ownership information being retained by companies? How well are we doing in terms of access to up-to-date and timely accounting information? How well are we doing in terms of the regulators and the authorities having access to that information? How well are we doing in regulating Derrick and Connie as they function as service providers? How well is central bank doing as they regulate those entities within the banking sector? How well is the Financial Services Commission, the FSC, doing as they regulate the insurance companies? How well is CAIPO doing as CAIPO regulates the non-profit companies and the charities? And how well is our anti-money laundering authority doing? And so in relation to that, we have been given a partially compliant rating. And we were given a partially compliant rating not because we had any legal deficiencies, but simply because there was not enough time when the on-site was conducted to be able to assess Barbados for the proper execution of what lies within our laws. We have since then applied for what is called a supplementary review, and we were successful in receiving the permission for the supplementary review. But that review now has to take place on the shores of Barbados, and so we're waiting for a date for that to happen, especially given what is currently obtaining with respect to the COVID-19 situation. Once that occurs, we are fully confident that we will move from a partially compliant rating to at least a largely compliant rating, or at the very top of compliant rating. Because of the partially compliant rating, we are currently on the grey list of the EU, and that grey list means that we're being monitored, and we will remain there until we move from that partial compliant rating. As it relates to the OECD, in relation to the areas such as substance, for example, Barbados is doing quite well. We're doing okay, and we will continue to do so as we continue to implement our substance regime. For those of you watching, I might want to know what on earth is the substance regime. The substance regime basically speaks to companies that are engaged in what can be called digitally mobile services, such as financial services, leasing services, headquarters business, etc., and to ensure that Barbados is not being used as a jurisdiction for shelf companies. These businesses have to demonstrate that they have a real and tangible presence here, that they have employees commiserate with the work that they're doing, that they have an adequate amount of expenditure, including office space, etc. And the Ministry of International Business is responsible for assessing their substance filings annually, and also for inspecting these companies to make sure that they comply. And so,
Okay.
Wendy, we are doing a tremendous amount of work with little resources, but we are doing quite well as far as I'm concerned.
Well, when we return, we'll hear more from Kevin Hunte, Miss Connie Smith, and Mr. Derrick Cummins as we look at online commerce and insight. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to the People's Business. We're looking at online commerce and insight. To help us discuss this evening, Connie Smith, the Managing Director at Tricor Caribbean, Derrick Cummins, the President of BIBA, and Mr. Kevin Hunte, who is the Coordinator of Government's Global Task Force. Now, one of the areas I want to look at is the new areas of business that have opened up. Renewable energy, the idea of the cryptocurrency. Let's look at those things and how they've been working for the offshore sector. Derrick, I'll come first to you as the man who knows what's going on in all the companies because of the chair you sit in.
Thank you, Wendy. You've put a lot on me there. Thank you. You mentioned cryptocurrencies. I want to move from just cryptocurrencies and talk about blockchain. We see the volatility in cryptocurrencies, and we've seen China done a major crackdown up to last week. But cryptocurrencies is just one thing on blockchain. Blockchain allows a lot of things to happen more seamlessly, a lot quicker. Legal contracts. You can have you can apply it to education. You can apply the blockchain to agriculture development. Better ways of getting sellers and buyers to meet. There are so many areas that can be on the blockchain that allows people to move from a centralized to a decentralized peer-to-peer communication and doing business. So not just cryptocurrencies, because again, that is becoming not a bad word yet, but a lot of persons are still not sold on cryptocurrencies. For sure that the banks see it sometimes as a threat. Governments don't know exactly how to tax it yet, so anything the governments can't tax, they don't like. But we also look at all the whole fintech, financial technology, again, new ways of moving money. in a season or period where the banks are de-risking, we're finding it more difficult sometimes to even inward remittances to help families, etc. Other ways of moving money from corporates to persons to pay invoices, to transfer, to pay for your education, and just to give to families, etc. We can be a hub for financial technology firms. Again, we have the infrastructure, we have some of the legislation, we have an FSC and central bank who is spearheading the regulation of such within the sandbox. So we have the ability to stand up and to be counted in these areas. We look also at healthcare, medical tourism. We've always spoken about persons coming here to have their major works done and the ability to recuperate in Barbados. I mean, what could be better? We look at research and development. We just heard from Sir Hilary Beckles that the University of the West Indies jumped 94 places in the ranking of universities. Imagine then if there was more emphasis on research and development within the university, because I think that's one area they can still do more work with. So they can partner with innovators to do more research and write more papers and see that ranking raise even higher. We spoke of education again. One thing we also spoke of was the renewable energies. Barbados, we're a small space, but renewable energy is still something that we cannot overlook. How do we make renewable energy work with the need for housing? How do we make renewable energy work, more importantly, for the need for agriculture? And one thing I've heard the Prime Minister say that, yes, we want to bring renewable energy, but how will your project work with the agricultural needs of the country? But these are things that we can get done. I'm in finance and investment management. We have maybe missed the boat on fund management because Cayman, Luxembourg have run away with that long time ago. We have a product, but it is underused. Last year, Singapore launched the VCC, the Variable Capital Company, which is an option or alternative to a fund structure. The Variable Capital Company, redemptions and subscriptions are made as capital into the company. Redemptions come via capital. They also come via income. And it allows them to innovate, because not only is it not a fund, it's a new fancy product that they can sell to the market, and they're already taking business from Cayman, taking business from Bahamas. So there's a whole lot that we can yet innovate in the financial sector, in the investment management sector. Even if we don't do a lot of investment management from here, we do already, but if that doesn't grow the management, we can consider the administration. If not fund management, we can do the administration of funds. We can do back office services. We can be your accountants, your settlers, your compliance officers, etc. So there's a lot. I'm going to stop there and maybe share that with Connie also.
Yes. And also to remind you of our call numbers, 228-5562, 228-5563. Connie, if you want to jump in here.
I do. Let me associate with everything Derrick has said, of course. Barbados, again, going back to the concept that Barbados is a jurisdiction of substance, and that's what we sell. We can't import things or goods, sort of embellish them with something else and send them off, because the cost of doing that is incredibly prohibitive. What we've been able to do is to export waitlist professional services. And therefore, it is on that back that the University of the West Indies, and congratulations again to them for their incredible jump up in the rankings in that regard. But there are those opportunities that we have to develop people, and that we have been exporting that professional services. So there are people who can build apps from Barbados, the accounting function that Derrick just mentioned. So a lot of those companies that may be setting up in you referred to it just now as offshore. I don't like the term offshore, I prefer international business. But when we then say those onshore, they can easily then engage or employ professionals who are sitting here in Barbados to do the substantive work because they have every confidence that we have the skills, the resources, and the know-how, and also the interest in stepping up and getting those things done. So being able to export our professional services, and that's actually what changed for Barbados in international business in the late 80s. So at the instance where it was first set up, it was for international entities. And then we appreciated that the people of Barbados could have this opportunity where they too could set up these international entities in the same structures that people were coming here to Barbados to use. We could set that up and we could export our own services to the world using these same structures. So in that sense, from the mid 80s, Barbados has been able to engage and to make people aware of the skills and resources that are available here. And we have been able successfully, I think, but there's always room for improvement in exporting our professional services. And I think that is something that we need to continue to focus on in the scheme of where we are becoming more digitally agile. Those skill sets will be called on for export continuously.
Okay.
Now, you asked earlier, Wendy.
Yes. Okay. Yes, Connie, continue.
You were talking earlier about ratings, and I wanted to just touch quickly on the Doing Business report, which everybody talks about, but we would have seen more recently that because of some challenges, the World Bank is no longer driving the Doing Business report. But importantly, the Doing Business report documents stages of how people assess jurisdictions, and I think it gives us a good point from which we need to make sure that we are continuously driving improvement, continuously looking to what our colleagues here, people who want to use here or people who choose to use here, what else do we need to do to make it better and easier for Barbados to be able to do business? And I think that we have a strong commitment to making sure that happens. And I would like for us to be able to continue in that commitment and embrace it fully, notwithstanding that we don't have the formal Doing Business report anymore from the World Bank.
Okay, I want to move to Kevin before we open back our phone lines. And I want to ask him whether or not we have all the necessary regulatory frameworks in place to deal with some of the same things Derrick was speaking about, the cryptocurrency, fintech, that new area of business that the rest of the world is now engaged in. I believe you're on mute. I can't hear you, Derrick. I mean, Kevin, I'm not hearing you. Oh. Okay, well, Kevin seems to be having a technical issue.
Can I speak to that somewhat, Wendy?
Yes, you can go ahead, Derrick.
Yeah. In the natural course of business, there will be innovation. Innovation often outpaces the regulator. And that's not a bad thing. But when the innovation outpaces the regulator, however, it can be harmful to the users of that innovation. So the regulator has to be as much in tandem as possible with the innovators. What Barbados has done here with the central bank and the FSC is develop this regulatory sandbox whereby innovators can innovate while somewhat being, I say, chaperoned by the regulator. So the regulator can, as immediately as possible, get an understanding of the new product, get an understanding of the risks and what is needed to mitigate those risks, and to tweak, to direct the innovator how to maybe tweak their product or their offering, and tell them, no, you can't offer this product to the general public. You need to offer this product only to qualified investors, etc. So regulation, like business, they're not static. Business evolves, regulation and legislation will evolve. What happens is where legislation may be sometimes too slow to cripple business. Businesses in Barbados do not want to operate in a gray area. Nobody wants to operate in a gray area. We want to operate with certainty. And what Barbados needs is certainty in legislation. And you've probably heard me speak before of mastering what we can control. with so many externalities working against us, we want to master what we can control. One of those things is certainty in legislation. And the government has been working on this, on working on the legislation for a number of products. Sometimes it's a start and stop. Sometimes they tell us we complain too much because we're agitating, want stuff done faster. Sometimes they say that we want every new shiny thing that is out there, but the reality is we all must evolve. So yes, BIBA works to get government to be faster and quicker with the legislation that we need to develop the products that the world wants. And it's a case of build it and they will come.
Okay.
So again, we can't say it's not here or there. It's not static. It's always evolving.
Well, we will find out about how quickly that pace is going and whether or not our government is playing catch up or if they're helping to create that playground when we return with the People's Business after the break. Welcome back to the People's Business. We're discussing online commerce and insight. Our call numbers 228-5562, 228-5563. Now, before we went to the break, Kevin was having a bit of technical issues, and I just want to recap for you quickly because I want for you to respond. Derrick was basically saying that sometimes the pace of the regulation and the legal framework that's necessary does not necessarily go in sync with the level of the innovation for things to happen. So I'm wondering from you now, are you on even keel? Are you behind what the innovators want to do, or are you laying the groundwork?
Okay, thanks, Wendy. It really depends on exactly what is the innovation or what is the product. For example, in some of the new spaces that Derrick would have spoken about, he alluded to the fact that there exists a sandbox, and the sandbox basically is a space in which a new product is placed for assessment. That would have occurred as government would have recognized the need to have some form of regulation in place to deal with the new innovative product, but until we can decipher exactly where it fits. You see, the challenge comes at times with you have to be very careful with how quickly you develop legislation and you put legislation in place. And then the attendant parts of the legislation, such as the regulations, etc. What government has been doing, and I believe not only the recent challenges that we had with the OECD and the EU bring this about, but indeed the governmental thrust to be more effective, what has occurred is that we have the committee of regulators that have been formed, and our regulators, all of our regulators in Barbados, meet monthly. And in those monthly meetings, new areas are discussed. Areas such as what is known as VAS, the virtual asset service providers, that is discussed with a view to look to see what we can do to facilitate the advent of this new type of service provider while ensuring that we do not run afoul of international requirements. And sometimes, unfortunately, while we have a very good working relationship with our service providers, sometimes in their desire for the need to have certain frameworks in place, there's a failure to fully appreciate that government must first understand what are the international requirements, because we can rush and we can put in place legislation or we can put in place rules, but then the legislation and the rules are contradictory or against what is required internationally. So the Minister of International Business has to walk the very tightrope of weighing the interests of the private sector while weighing overall interests of government to ensure that the nation of Barbados and the name of Barbados is protected. So we are nimble. There are some areas and instances where we may press pause or we may need to slow down so that we can fully understand what is happening from an international regulatory perspective. And then there are areas in which we can move with great dispatch and be able to have a product that our practitioners can take and offer to the business community.
Okay, our call number is
Wendy?
228-5562, 228-5563. I believe you were interjecting, Connie?
Yes, I wanted to say that when we talk about regulation, I myself think that um, regulation is actually one of the other pillars in which we're able to sell Barbados. So we have always, over the years, heard about jurisdictions that are associated with all kinds of scams. Barbados has been fortunate to be able to have what I consider to be generally right-sized and appropriate legislation, and I think that that regulatory environment that we have is actually as competitive and as marketable as we are selling the quality of life that we offer here from Barbados. So I think that regulation, while obviously some people may think it may be heavy-handed in some respects, I think that we have been able to achieve a balance, which is a whole selling point on its own for Barbados. And I think that that should be something that we should be saying from in our marketing of the jurisdiction as well.
So therefore, you've not had any major challenges per se with certain rules and how they impact on your company being able to do what it needs to do, especially in terms of wanting to do product expansion or the law.
I haven't, no. And I think, again, that is going back to the same collaboration that we continue to enjoy with the regulators through BIBA, and being a past president myself and still continuing to serve as a director of BIBA, we continue to engage the regulators, we continue to engage all of the stakeholders for the international business sector at every opportunity to ensure that we are ahead as much as we can, or that we are being as collaborative and as inclusive as we can to make sure that we always put Barbados first. And we are later on, I'm sure that you'll be hearing a little bit more about Global Business Week, which occurs in October this year, as it does every year. But that is the opportunity where we, together with all of our stakeholders, the Central Bank, the Ministry of International Business, the Financial Services Commission, Invest Barbados, we come together and have really great discussions and a really great week of activities around global business. And at each one of those events that we have during Global Business Week, it is a continuation of the conversations that we have started and we have throughout the year with all of the stakeholders that we work with in international business.
Okay. You're listening to The People's Business, 228-5562, 228-5563. You can pose your questions to our panel, Miss Connie Smith, Derrick Cummins, and Kevin Hunte. Since, before we throw to the callers, I want to look at one of the areas that in the past presented some issues. And that was the issue of, I know Connie said she doesn't like the idea of offshore, but let's look at it then as international gambling, and whether or not that was something that was suitable for Barbados. Kevin, you might be able to give us the reasons as to why it is not something that we in this particular jurisdiction like, but it seems to work well for several other Caribbean countries and contribute significantly to their bottom line.
What I can say on that, Wendy, is that has been a policy decision of successive governments in terms of not exposing Barbados to the whole arena of international gambling and what comes with it. Certain other behaviors and other spin-off comes with the whole advent of international gambling, and it has never been something that has sat well within the mouths of Barbadians and within the state of Barbadian society. I see nothing on the immediate horizon to suggest that that is going to change, but that is just from my perspective, and that is the only answer that I can offer you at this time.
Derrick, would you have had any companies that were interested in using this jurisdiction for said area?
No, that has not come across my table at all.
Okay.
As Kevin said, policy decisions similar to a lot of our neighbors are doing, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago, when the citizenship by investment. Barbados has opted not to do that. So the reality is we do cherry pick what is best for our island and our
But
product.
there might be some who might say that in the cherry picking that we're very stringent and straight laced and by the book, toe the line type of business in terms of what we seek to attract.
Well, there are people who will say that we've gone overboard with the medical cannabis business. So you win some you don't.
Okay.
I think we've done our very best to innovate and to bring the businesses to Barbados, and but all that we do nothing to erode the product of Barbados in its totality. Let me say that.
Okay. We don't want
Yes,
to
and Wendy, on
taint the
the
island. Yes, Kevin?
Yeah.
no, we don't. And on the whole issue of citizenship by investment, Barbados has placed a very high price on our concept of citizenship, and we are not prepared to sell it or to appear to sell it. In addition to that, citizenship by investment also has some question marks internationally from a regulatory perspective, and where we don't need to open eyes of international scrutiny, we won't do so.
How do you compare the welcome stamp to that, Kevin?
Well, the welcome stamp, I'm sure Derek and Connie can speak to this as well. The welcome stamp does not offer citizenship. It simply offers or provides a way or and means for persons to come and work remotely from Barbados. It is not a guarantee to you achieving citizenship in any way, form, or fashion. So it is not akin to a citizenship by investment scheme.
Okay. Derrick, a question before we go to break. Since the start of COVID 2020, how many new businesses has BIBA had sign up? International businesses, roughly.
That's tough. Our membership right now is about 140, and we stayed, or I think 140 or 170. I am slipping now, but I dare say we are maybe positive 15, 20.
Okay.
Some have left the jurisdiction for varying reasons and have not registered with BIBA, and others have been added. But for certain, um, businesses that have registered in Barbados with CAIPO and the Ministry of International Business would be substantially more than that. What it is, we find a lot of service providers will register with BIBA, but when they're on board individual companies, they do not always register, and they do not need to register their companies with BIBA. I wish they would. I want them to. It's another reason to say that you're in Barbados. It's another thing to say as far as substance. Hey, look, I am also a member of this wonderful umbrella body called BIBA, the Organization for Global Business.
Okay. In the same vein, you can't recollect exactly how many have left. And was it, you mentioned different reasons, but was it because any of them petered out completely because COVID caused them to collapse?
We have not had any of our members come and say that due to COVID, 100% companies are leaving. Understand that, again, I static versus evolving. A corporation is not a static being. There may be a merger within the group, And with that, they no longer need a Barbados structure. It could be as simple as that for a business to leave Barbados. So
Okay.
it's tough to say.
Oh, we'll be back with more on the People's Business. Welcome back to the People's Business. We're looking at online commerce and insight. With me, my panelists are Connie Smith, the Managing Director of Tricor Caribbean, Mr. Derrick Cummins, the President of BIBA, and Mr. Kevin Hunte, Coordinator of Government's Global Business Task Force. Welcome back to you. Welcome back to our listeners or viewers this afternoon. Now, Derrick, if I can call on you again, in terms of the contribution of these businesses, what does it contribute in terms of the country's revenue? I know that the last central bank report, your area was one of the top performing ones and the only one which really saw any incremental signs of growth. What's the contribution like?
Yes. So we often talk about that tax contribution, which even though it's down from, let's say, 2009, it's still over this period represented about 2/3 of government corporate revenue. And as you said, it showed strength and it showed growth and it gave substantial support to an economy that lost tourism as its number one driver, and other sectors also struggled. It continued to employ over 4,000 people in Barbados in high-paying jobs, highly skilled jobs, to the extent, I would say, Wendy, that when the Barbados minimum wage discussion was coming on, and I'm a director of the Barbados Private Sector Association, the discussions were happening. I gave some input, but I was muted because it almost doesn't affect my sector very much because there are not many in the sector in that bracket. Let's move from the taxes. Let's talk about the expat community. You mentioned earlier that there are a lot of Barbadians now at top positions, and that's fantastic. What that has done also, though, was diminish what was a very vibrant expat community. It's still there. It's still growing again, I think. But they came in, their kids went to our schools, they ate at our restaurants, they rented our best houses, and they added value like that. Added to agriculture, added to real estate. We talk about, again, jobs, high quality jobs for our well trained and educated nationals. We talk about hotel night stays when directors and other corporate individuals come to stay at Barbados. And we talk about taking up the need for infrastructure, the need for offices, again, impacting on real estate, the need for telecommunications. The impact of this sector renounce beyond taxation. That's why, too, I was so happy when the lady called earlier to say she's so happy, because what BIBA is trying to get the society to understand is that this is for everyone. And we can upscale this business with little need for space, like agriculture needs, little need for the build out like tourism sector needs, etc. So there's a whole lot more than just taxation, but yes, we have done a lot on the taxation side in recent times.
Kevin, what does it augur for your sector in terms of your particular portfolio, in terms of its contribution?
Okay, Wendy. Before I answer that, I just wanted to clarify some things, just in case our viewers had the wrong idea. But when you were speaking with Derrick concerning businesses registering and businesses leaving. Remember that BIBA is an association, but when companies come to Barbados, they have to commence or start their business activity through corporate affairs. And so corporate affairs is the place that you would need to look at to really measure the increase of business registration and company incorporation, as well as deregistration or when companies wind up and leave Barbados. From our perspective, we really continue to be appreciative of our corporate and trust service providers, and they do a tremendous job, and indeed, they are on the vanguard of soliciting business for Barbados. You see, the government's role is one of frameworking and one of regulation, but really and truly, the work is done in terms of bringing the businesses to Barbados and maintaining them is done through our intermediaries, whether they be our corporate and trust service providers, or accountants, or lawyers, etc. Um, as Derrick indicated, our government would have been able to note that we had significant increase in revenues and significant revenue intake as it relates to corporate tax. But as Derrick also pointed out, the impact goes beyond tax. The impact goes to things such as the quality of professional that we have in Barbados, where we have professionals employed in various companies, in various areas, various industries, acquiring various skill sets, enhancing their abilities, and being able to pass on that knowledge locally. We have impact in terms of the CEOs and other high professionals within these corporations coming to Barbados and wanting to return for vacation, thereby impacting our tourism our tourist intake. They also would, in many instances, look to acquire homes and purchase homes here and come to stay here during the winter months. When that is done, you see spin-offs in terms of the ancillary services necessary for the preservation of these properties, whether it be in terms of garden maintenance, whether it be in terms of chefs, whether it be in terms of maids, butlers, drivers, etc. And so the international business and financial services sector impact a wide cross-section of Barbadian society.
That was actually going to be my next question to you, Kevin. How does the average Barbadian get involved in this sector? How does it impact them and they feed into it? But I guess you've already answered it in part. I don't know if Connie, you might perhaps want to add here?
I do, but I also want to preface my response by reminding that, importantly, the money that comes into Barbados from international business or global business, as we refer to it more now, is actually foreign currency. So it's foreign exchange because those international entities obviously are not allowed to work or conduct their business here in Barbados. So they have to bring all of their foreign currency to the island, that foreign currency, which of course we then use. Hello?
Yeah, Connie, sorry to interrupt you, but remember they can conduct their business here now.
They can
And
do
that was
that. They
before
can do that now.
yeah,
But what
they
I was
can
saying,
conduct,
right?
yeah.
So I was saying that all of those business activities before and all the tax that we earned, everything was all foreign currency that we had to bring, that was brought to Barbados to afford us the opportunity of buying food externally, clothing, and expand our businesses. That, of course, has changed, where we can now offer the opportunity and bring the world to Barbados and Barbados to the world. It also then means that, as Kevin said, we have the plethora of opportunities for development of our people, but it also brings the opportunity of exposure, which I think is very important, and not for us to be have a small island mentality where we don't appreciate that we can contribute and we can be an important cog in the international platform. I think that it opens us up to being confident in who we are and the product that we have to offer, and be bold about offering Barbados on the international stage.
Okay. Derrick, if we can, you weren't able to give me a specific number, what have you, but what has, or how I should say, BIBA altered its marketing plug in terms of getting those new businesses which sign up in Barbados to come be part of your organization? How have you changed your direction to try to lure them, especially the more innovative types of businesses that are now opening up?
Yes, thank you, Wendy. Well, we first let them know that we are here. And one of the biggest ways that we express ourselves is, as Connie mentioned earlier, our Global Business Week, which happens at the end of October. And this year is from October 24th to the 29th, that would be. And we have our virtual 5K. You can hear more about that later. But let me talk about the conference. Well, the week, virtual 5K, a commencement service and community project. This year, we have a virtual opening ceremony reception. We didn't have that last year, but we have it again. We talked to our youngsters in the secondary school symposium and career showcase. We have a public discussion forum. This year it's about Barbados Online. Are we ready? We
Are
have
we?
our global Barbados Online. Are we ready?
Are
I
we?
think we are. I think we are very ready. I think we've proven that there have been no breakage in our business over the last year and a half as we have had to go online. And we look at what KIPO is doing, the corporate registry now. They were able early August to allow the corporate service providers the opportunity to kick the tires of their new online system, phase one, which allows you to do a name, to register a name, to register a company, and ultimately you'll be able to do a whole lot of business with the corporate registry online. We see the easy pay system in government. We see the ministry doing a whole lot of business, allowing us to do more and more online. So, you know what? One will say that we should have done a number of these things before, but the opportunity to do that and the funding to do that wasn't there, especially in the last 3, 4, 5 years. But here we are now. We're not perfect, but we are coming a long way, and I'm excited about 2022 and about really the implementation of what KIPO is doing in the Ministry of International Business and the ability to incorporate a company a whole lot quicker, the ability to do searches a whole lot quicker, and to really promise our clients and potential clients to deliver what we as service providers promise, to make a better promise, not to say, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 months, but we can say with surety things can happen in 2 days, 5 days, 10 days, and deliver on that promise. And then we have from the 27th to the 29th for our 3-day conference. And this conference sees speakers, panelists, domestic, regionally, and also international speakers. And how have we changed? This used to be a in person for the first 13 or so years, in person conference. Last year was the first time we were 100% virtual, and we are again this year. We are finding ways to keep the interest of our members, to excite new potential members about being part of BIBA, to add a value for our membership.
Okay.
More and more online webinars and online training and online engagement.
I want to thank you, Derrick. We're going to take another commercial break here, and when we return, we'll have the takeaways from our 3 panelists this evening. We'll be back. And we're back with the People's Business. Before we left off, Derrick was telling us about all the interesting and exciting things that are coming up for Global Business Week. I believe it runs from October 24th until the 29th. However, I have a question for you, Kevin. Derrick wasn't exactly able to answer it for me, but I'm wondering if you can tell me at this point how much new business would have actually signed on in this 1.5 year COVID period.
I can't tell you exactly how many new companies would have incorporated with Kuiper or how many new businesses were registered under the business name. But what I can tell you is that from our perspective at the International Business Unit, particularly as it relates to a lot of businesses that are engaged in international financial services and other geographically mobile activities, they utilized something called a foreign currency permit. And we've seen an increase, while I don't have the figures for you, but we have seen an increase definitely, even during COVID, of entities that are applying for the foreign currency permit, which tells me that COVID has not negatively impacted businesses looking to conduct apply their trade within the Barbados framework and the Barbados structure. And I think that is something that we ought to be encouraged about as we continue to look to see how we can continue to develop the international business and financial services sector. We can't report that there has been a downturn in foreign currency permit applications. Actually, there's been an increase.
Okay, what's the most pressing thing now that the task force has on its agenda to deal with? What's before you now that needs to be addressed?
Well, what we would have been engaged in at the behest of the Prime Minister, we would have recently concluded, which Connie and Derrick and other service providers took part in, a product development retreat, which because of COVID, we were forced to split and have it mostly virtual with a few persons in attendance. And there's a lot of information that would have come out of that retreat relative to the products that we have and the development of those products, whether by way of amendment or enhancement. And so the review task force is busy working on that. We're also busy continuing to engage the companies that would be impacted by the Pillar 2 initiative of the OECD. And then we're also looking to see what areas of doing business needs improvement, but we're not doing this in silos. I must say that the Honorable Prime Minister has commissioned a ministerial group headed by the Honorable Marshall Cattle, and each ministry is involved in different areas in looking to improve the ease of doing business. And so government is about a collaborative approach and not a silo approach. And so that will continue as we look to feed into that process as well. And it will all culminate in a presentation of our report to the Minister of International Business, the Prime Minister of Barbados, and the Cabinet of Barbados as to what our recommendations are, both in terms of the preservation and any amendments being made to the sector, along with suggestions for what Barbados can do as a result of the Global Minimum Tax Rate Initiative.
What's the timeline for that?
And I was just about to say, and we're aiming to deliver that by the middle of December this year.
Okay, so come 2022, we should possibly be looking at some new initiatives to lure more business to the island.
Yes, and one thing I can say, Wendy, one of the things that we're finding and is coming out loud and clear is that Barbados has a lot more going for it than we actually realize. We have actually a lot more legislative room and play space, if I can call it that, than we realize. And in some areas, there might not be a need for the enactment of specific legislation to deal with certain things, but rather for us to become more au fait with what already exists and how to utilize it. And then one major thing that we have discovered and we're continuing to discover, and I know Derrick and Connie will agree with me, is that we must relook how we market Barbados and market Barbados as a jurisdiction. And that is done in conjunction with Invest Barbados. And that is one of the main things that is coming out so far, that Barbados must be marketed and marketed well, and not just for what we've become known for, and that is our tax rates and our double taxation treaties. There are other areas that Barbados needs to have an international voice and an international brand.
Maybe Connie and Derrick can tell us what are some of those selling points that you think need to be added in terms of how we put Barbados out there. Connie?
Some of those we spoke about earlier, but certainly things like the opportunity to live, work, and play from Barbados is an important lifestyle decision that many people would take up to do business in Barbados. We also have the opportunity of being able to offer a workforce and human resources and other resources from Barbados that is second to none. And Barbados has a growing legislative platform that I think is also a compelling business case, where we see other vehicles and other opportunities being added to our platform, which also makes it very interesting for people. So I think when we look to market Barbados, we sell things like the lifestyles, but we also sell certainty. We sell the most developed parliament that we have in the Western Hemisphere. We sell that stability. We sell the partnership that we enjoy as a public and private sector. All of those things make to provide the certainty and the stability that international investors are always interested in. And I think that we need to embrace those and not just sell from the tax, the low-hanging, lower tax perspective.
Yes, I was
Final
hoping Connie
takeaway
would release some.
for you.
Connie would release something for me, and I think she did a great job. She didn't mention the art infrastructure, telecommunications. That is something that we do well. Earlier, she mentioned that our regulatory framework and the transparency that has come about by our strength for our anti-money laundering processes and regulations. Those are also value added.
Okay. And your final takeaways, Kevin?
My final takeaway is that Barbados is a small nation, but as has been said before, we have the ability to punch above our weight. And I would like to encourage all of Barbados, regardless of whatever area you're involved in, whatever vocation, not just to be limited to here, but as we've talked a lot about business coming in, I want to flip it in terms of my takeaway, and I want to encourage us to think about taking Barbados global. If we're speaking about global business, we're not only talking about businesses of international renown and repute coming to Barbados, but I also want to encourage us to think of the reverse or the converse, where the Barbadian businesses and Barbadian way of doing things and Barbadian professionals can see the globe, can see the world as their stage and go and make their mark for Barbados.
Okay. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening on The People's Business, where we looked at online commerce and insight. Ms. Connie Smith, the Managing Director of Tricor Caribbean, Mr. Derrick Cummins, President of BIBA and CEO Amicorp Bank and Trust, and Kevin Hunte, Coordinator of Government's Global Business Task Force. I want to thank all three of you for joining us this evening on The People's Business. It's been interesting. It's been insightful. I hope you have a wonderful October with your Global Business Week, and let's all put our best foot forward and get business moving in Barbados and take us on the global stage. That's been The People's Business. I'm your host, Wendy Burke. Do enjoy your night.